traveled many moonless nights, cold and weary, with a baby inside, and I wonder what I've done. Holy Father, you have come and chosen me now to carry your Son. I am waiting in a silent prayer. I am frightened by the load I bear in a world as cold as stone. Must I walk this path alone? Be with me now. Be with me now. Wrath of heaven, hold me together. Be forever near me. Wrath of heaven. Wrath of heaven, light in my darkness, pour over me your holiness, for you are holy. Breath of heaven. Do you wonder as you watch my face if a wiser one should have had my place? But I offer all I am for the mercy of your plan. Help me be strong. Help me be. Help
Good morning, everyone. I have to offer a disclaimer before we get started. I was so excited to put on my new sweater today, but then I had a flashback to the early 2000s where there was a made-for-TV product that I thought was ridiculous, and I judged it harshly. People were posting photos of themselves on a new social media app called Facebook, and I thought, you don't know how ridiculous you look. Then I put this on, and I thought, oh my word, some designer added a collar, and I am now sporting an upgrade version of the Snuggie. Joke's on me, it's really comfy. Do you have a storyteller in your family? One who shares the foibles and familiar anecdotes that give you a sense of the people along the way to you in a family tree tall and wide. In my family, immigrants and pioneers who called it good in the lush rolling hills of northeastern Ohio, soldiers who fought in wars in the name of freedom, and Quakers and Mennonites, firm in their pacifism. We are of this and that kind of family, human in our striving and humble in our imperfections. And often you can find a link to those people in what you hold most dear. While my grandfather Jones lived well into my college years, divorce limited us to a handful of experiences. And what I do know years after his death was that I learned that his favorite poem was entitled Trees by Joyce Kilmer. I'm grateful for a man who loved trees and taught his son to love trees. And he in turn taught me to love them. An intersection of generations, and in those ties, a sense of belonging. My grandma Weimer was an entirely different story. She was my go-to when the world was in place and when the world fell apart. And when her screen door slammed, it was a notice to the world that I was front and center in her world, unless Wheel of Fortune or Lawrence Welk was on. I was okay with it, even in the holding pattern that was my grandmother's world. She was a teacher, and she planted in me the seed of my love for all things books. Hardback, softcover, my own and those in the library, card catalogs, Google it. The smell of pages, traveling free of charge in other worlds, and befriending characters that removed me from my tiny village, if only for a moment in time. I received this book the Christmas of my 7th year, and while for some of you that might be right up there with unwrapping a gift to find socks and underwear, I had a ticket to new adventures. A week or so ago, I woke and I just laid there thinking about today and that book and how I should have realized it was a primer for my teenage years. There's a story about a little duckling who's different from the others, and the bullying is relentless. There's a story about temptation and the cost of eating unhealthy food, especially if it's sticking to the side of a house. Yet another story talks about the damage done when you let the opinion of others determine whether or not you are the fairest of them all. When you seek the way, that yellow brick road, with all your heart, your courage, and a brain, you'll find the power that sets you free to find your way home. Do not be afraid. At 117, it's the most commonly repeated phrase in the Bible, and our God knows us well. My teenage years may be in a rearview mirror too small to recall, but I do know that I was in a constant state of anxiety, practicing conversations in the bathroom mirror, driving to school, singing any and every song that fit my big feelings, just trying to figure out what I was doing on any given day, let alone understanding life and my place in it. Now imagine that teenage self in Mary's place. The Bible doesn't tell us the time of day or what she was doing, and I wonder if that was purposeful, the ever-extended invitation. But I'm ahead of myself. Gabriel appeared to this teenage girl and said, "Rejoice, favored one, the Lord is with you." And while we read she was confused by this, the Greek translation could also mean disturbed, agitated, or deeply troubled. And for some reason, that's the response that hits closer to home for me. Rejoice, favored one. The Lord is with you. Oh, I'm just a teenager. I'm just a girl. Low status. I'm just a piece of property. I'm just. What do you want with me? And so how does she go from deeply troubled to the Magnificat? I don't know about you, but I'm not sure anyone could get there in that space alone. And God didn't leave her hanging. Gabriel told Mary that her cousin, unable to conceive, was now 6 months pregnant in her old age. It doesn't say Mary sat around and thought about that for 1 minute. She made a beeline for Elizabeth's home, into the pages of someone else's story, to see that even though nothing made sense, God was up to something good. She needed to read the pages of someone else's story to know that she could write of God's goodness on her own pages. I've never seen a sequoia redwood tree, but I read that they are mammoth-sized. It's the root system that intrigues me, because you'd think something so tall would have a deep taproot, but they only go down about 6 to 12 feet, and yet the trees rarely fall over. These 500-ton trees that reach 350 feet toward the heavens, they withstand strong winds, earthquakes, fires, storms, and prolonged flooding. How? Well, their roots intertwine with the roots of other redwood trees, literally holding each other up. Their roots interlock to help them stand and support each other, to prevent them from being knocked down by the adversaries of life. And because Mary accepted an invitation into a relationship with God, who looked upon her as highly favored, she moved forward even when. Because Mary interlocked her story with Elizabeth's, who witnessed that all things were indeed possible, she stood a bit stronger and faced the storms to come. And because Mary dared to embrace a truth beyond her fear, she birthed into this world joy, peace, hope, and love. What have you been through recently that, do not be afraid, just feels like something you can't dial up? The divorce is too real, the addiction too challenging, the workload at school too overwhelming, that argument too raw, the drama too deep, the loneliness all too consuming. I listened to a podcast of Hidden Brain recently where the U.S. Surgeon General stated that loneliness is at epidemic proportions. And it started before the pandemic. The pandemic only served to accelerate an issue, the health effects which are greater than obesity and sedentary living. The stress it causes has the same effect as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and it leads to cardiovascular disease, fragmented sleep, depression, alcoholism, and dementia. The U.S. Surgeon General went on to state that one of the most powerful sources of healing lies in relationships. It's an essential part of being human. And he shared that he's dispensed many a medication, but one of the most powerful medicines we have is love. Love. It's as paramount to our survival as thirst and hunger. A young girl with 1,000,001 reasons to lay low, to live in the fear of not good enough for something like that, say, thanks for thinking of me, but I'm going to pass. She dared to say yes. Twine her roots with those who came in pages written by prophets and those with a yes of their own. She dared to believe in a God who invited her to the dance, and she sang a song of praise in past tense. A yes with a courageous belief in a God who would make it so. Not long ago, many of you signed cards for those in college and a young man in the military. You said yes, even when it interrupted the service. It was an invitation unexpected. You didn't recognize the name on the card, or maybe you did. Your hand started to cramp because the cards just kept coming. You just wanted to sit quietly. You didn't have a pen. And how am I supposed to take care of this when I don't have what it takes? God invites us into relationship at the most inopportune times, or maybe just the right time. 24 hours after those packages and cards were sent to our college students, the texts arrived, and this time from both females and males, with images of a card unfolded to reveal all of your signatures, selfies holding not the sweet treats, but your card with all of the signatures, and over again came texts that said, "I feel so loved." To those unmoored in a land far from home, your signature said, "You are not alone. You and I belong together in a forest where our trees, where our dreams, our heartaches, our longings, and our love intertwine, where hunger and thirst and loneliness have no home because Jesus Christ lives in our midst, and all possibility exists in the invitation of God." In the dark pink, deep blue-gray ribbons that rest in creamy-colored skies with each and every sunrise comes God's invitation. And through the power of God, we too have the opportunity to birth joy, peace, hope, and love. You are the storyteller, and your pen rests in the inkwell of your yes.